Let's do it.
Do it.
Do it now.
Do it.
Get to the chopper.
I'm thinking of Ben Stiller's character from what movie?
Zoolander?
Starsky and Hutch.
No.
Those superheroes that were misfits, right?
No, man.
Mr.
Starsky
Angry?
and Hutch.
He was like a guest in a movie, like it was a small part, but his character, it was just a douchebag, and he's like, do it, just do it. And it wasn't
Starsky and Hutch.
Huh? No, it wasn't Dodgeball. He was like a business executive in this one.
He was wearing a green suit, man. Do it, just do it now. He was at a bar mitzvah.
Alrighty, guys, let's hit the intro and get on with it. Rolling. Here we go.
Of course I'm right, Loryan, like about everything that I'm going to be talking about today.
Oh, what a way to open. Thanks, Al.
Oh, God.
Welcome, everyone, to another Regarding 365 debate discussion panel. We've got a few peeps on here to get stuck into a pretty hot topic. Also welcoming those in the chat room that have joined us, so we will be looking there for some commentary as well. And if you've got questions or smarter remarks, constructive stuff, then feel free to pitch it in. Hey, let's intro off, and because teams, how we've got 4 quadrants, but everyone sees it in different order.
Is the Brady Bunch?
Yeah. So
I've never seen 5 quadrants, Darrell.
No, I know. I've managed to overlay a 5th one with the fanciness of OBS. But anyway,
hey man, it's 2019. You can have 5 quadrants.
South African, can you introduce yourself, please?
Good right now. My name is Alistair Pugin. I'm coming to you from an arsehole country, according to Donald Trump. And a shithole, not arsehole, shithole. So what is Donald? The arsehole that has the shithole attached to it, probably. Anyhow, yeah, sunny South Africa, Johannesburg. It is late and people are laughing, so I'll just stop talking.
And from Melbourne.
G'day, this is Loryan from Down Under. Loryan Strant here from, Melbourne, Australia. Not a shithole country, but a wannabe America country. Wow, this got political pretty quick. It's 8:04 a.m. here, and I'm quite sprightly.
And from Central US? Yes?
Yeah, that's right. This is Dean Swann. I'm calling in from Minneapolis, Minnesota.
We are.
Let's put these on. It's very cold here. Glad to be here with you guys.
Awesome. And sunny Seattle.
Ooh, sunny Seattle. Yeah, that's not going to happen. My name is Jethro Seghers. I indeed live in Seattle. Originally Belgian, moved about 5 years ago to the land of opportunities and to support my amazing president. That's it.
And you're now Mr. Gerard Depardieu.
Well, he gave me a green card, so I have to be supportive of something.
Yeah, definitely. Now, the topic, if you haven't caught from the thumbnail, it's about where do we communicate and collaborate privately in Microsoft 365. And as a hot part of that discussion, of course, we'll be talking about private channels in Microsoft Teams, which might take a good portion of the discussion. Oh, some people are yawning, some people are flinching already. Do I have $50 over there from Dean?
That was like,
So the way this will work, because we do want to give people a chance to have their say without when we get to the section of talking over the top of each other, each of us is going to have 3 minutes to state our case or our thoughts, paint a picture of what we think. We'll pass that around the room, and then we'll start exchanging in brief times on soapboxes. No? Okay. Let's actually start with Jethro.
Sure. So where do we communicate privately or collaborate privately? Well, Here's the thing, right? So there's a bunch of tools where we can do that. And I think if you look at what we have, there's a number of tools that we can use for that. Now, if you want to drill it back or bring it back to the situation of private channels in Microsoft Teams, I'm 100% for. I'm 100% for the feature. I think Microsoft has missed that boat, has missed that in the design phase. And let me give you a few reasons why I think it should have been in there from the beginning. First of all, look at what Microsoft is positioning Microsoft Teams as the hub for collaboration. So they really want to make sure that you start in team, you stay in team with the advancements that they're making around applications in the SharePoint framework to make that as part of Teams as well. You're seeing a lot of push to have Microsoft Teams at that centralized environment where everything starts and pretty much hopefully where you stay as well. If you do everything or try to do everything in Microsoft Teams, one of the basic concepts of having a more restrictive collaboration suddenly needs to be done in another tool, right? Could be Yammer, could be another tool. That really doesn't make sense with the premise that they're starting with, making Teams that centralized environment. Additionally, it's not a secret that Microsoft Teams was designed and was released as a competitor to Slack. When you're going after a competitor, one of the things you always have to do is look at what does that other tool make it successfully, right? What are they doing well? What are they looking for? And one of the things that come up a lot when we having discussion, well, Slack can do it. That's the reason why I went for Slack or chose Slack over Teams. So you're seeing a lot of competitive disadvantages when it comes to Teams over Slack. And then when you look at the implementation from an enterprise perspective, enterprises want to control things. I'm not saying that you suddenly have to put everything down, but being able to have some kind of role-based access model on your channels, on your teams, is definitely something that is a required feature within larger environments where they want to control who has access to what. So again, really all that stuff together really makes sense to have private channels. And one thing that I do see a lot as feedback coming from MVPs, regional directors, so-called experts, is really the fact that I think that the reason why it isn't there yet is really the architecture behind Teams, and they really missed the boat on that one, where they said, we're going to use groups for that, Office 365 groups, and then we'll see how we come up to that private part. And I think that the architecture just has shown right now that it was more difficult than they anticipated. And coming from a program manager perspective myself, your architecture cannot design what your features are being built or will be built, right? So I'm going to close here. I think it's something we need. I think there's a lot of reasons for, and I think Microsoft is starting to realize that as well. Unfortunately, there's a lot of gotchas that you need to go through before you can make that into a reality.
Thanks, Jethro. You definitely summing it up how this discussion will go. I know, Al, you've given it a lot of thought and looked deeper into some of those possible gotchas and restrictions, and you got some strong opinions. I do love that picture you chose for your blog post. The old guy who's just like, oh, I'm so over this conversation. Go, Al. So
let's address one thing that my fellow compatriot there talked about. He mentioned RBAC. RBAC in Teams is rubbish. Doesn't exist. Let's get that out the way. All right. So yeah, it's great role-based access control in Teams. It's bullshit because everyone's a site collection administrator. Everyone's got power in Office 365 groups. Coming to Office 365 groups, have you deleted an Office 365 group recently?
Yeah.
So what effort did Microsoft spend, right? They went and said Electron, so let's just put a wrapper on the top of Office 365 groups and we call it Teams. There's your architectural design problem because they spent no time looking at the architectural design of Teams. So go delete an Office 365 group, boom, everything disappears because everything hangs off it. So yes, if they're going to rewrite Teams, great. Do not use Electron, it's rubbish. Coming back to the original conversation around where do we communicate privately, right, in the Microsoft 365 ecosystem. Don't. All right, pick the phone up, call the person, have a conversation. I mean, Teams has already got a bug inside of hiding conversations, right? You tick the box and Loryan, you can pass out. I don't care. We'll resuscitate you later.
Not a bug, it's a feature, literally.
It's known. What is that? What is that? What is that? A known? What is it called?
Known
it's not
issue.
It's a known issue fixed in the next release. So let's talk about it. So if you want to have a one-on-one conversation with someone, even sending a mail, right, to that person directly, if someone is standing over my shoulder, you can read it. So how do you have a private conversation, right? I think it's limited in Teams, private channels in Teams. What a fish cake. I don't care, right? Yammer. I don't want to offend the Yammer wearing T-shirt guy. For me, there's also Kaisala, right? Where does WhatsApp win in this? Because everyone uses WhatsApp, right? And they can run WhatsApp for business. So forget the Microsoft ecosystem. You have to worry about private conversations in WhatsApp. If you really want to have a private conversation, pick the phone up, call them. Go old school. If you want to dial. Is anything private in Microsoft 365? It's the other thing. I can run a DLP policy. Not run a DLP policy. I can do an e-discovery and litigation all the way up the wazoo, and I'll find that conversation where you slated me because I didn't like your comment, Loryan. So, yes. What do I think? I think private conversations in today's digital world does not exist. That's why you have to go retro and analog and make a phone call. That's it from my side. Darrell, if you need me, you know where to find me.
Okay. Thanks, Al, for getting a bit deeper in there and bringing in some of those other places that we could have those private conversations. Rightly so, to say that conversations could happen even off and outside of the Microsoft 365 platform. People go to a different room to have that conversation. Let's hear from Dean. What have you got? Your thoughts around this, Dean?
Yeah, thanks, Darrell. Where I would start, look. First of all, what problem are we trying to solve? The conversation that we were having today is all about, where do you go in Microsoft 365 to have those private conversations? And we immediately went to Teams. And I think that's a very interesting avenue that we've gone down. So I like to start all these kinds of conversations with, what problem are you trying to solve? And if you want to have a private conversation, and for all the good reasons that Al mentioned, the architecture doesn't support it in Teams, and it's going to be, maybe blow it up, redo it if you really want to look at it from an architectural standpoint. But what problem are you trying to solve? If you want to have a private conversation, you can definitely do the retro stuff, And the second thing I'd like to enter into the conversation, if I might, is how do we define private? Does it mean, and I like to be, the Yammer guy, because Yammer has the capability to create private groups, and then you can go super secret by choosing not to list that group in the directory, for example. How private do you need to be? So that's something I would also kind of want to know here. The other thing I would add is, if we're going to say, bring up the, because Slack has it. Well, I just don't know if that's a good enough argument to include it into Teams. I just don't see that as a compelling reason. The other thing, I went and looked in user voice, and there are a lot of comments. And most of them are, well, because I want it. Well, because we need it. Well, what's your business case? Well, I'd like to, for all the supervisors. Well, how many are there? 6? Have a group chat. Call it a day, And the other thing, in closing, to hand it over to the Australian, the way I think of this is, Teams are about speed, and when you think of this, who's in the room? Do I need to get up and talk to someone, or how private do I need to be? And that's where I would start this conversation.
Yep, good points there, Dean. And I'm glad that you also brought up we have this capability within chat. If you are going to be in Teams, we can start our chat and have that private there, much like picking up the phone in a sense. Loryan's going to bring in a very balanced looking conversation as he holds that fidget spinner.
It is actually quite a balanced.
I wish I could zoom into that. There we go.
Skype on one side, Teams on the other.
Very nice.
So look, I think really good points all around, and the reality is I actually agree with all of them. But this is the thing: is it's about balance, which this prop worked in nicely for. The reality is that what Microsoft kind of boasts is that it gives people choice. So I get and I've told people where they said, "Oh, what about private channels?" Like, well, for now, use a group chat because those can support up to 50 people. I do see the need for private chat, not so much because Slack has it, because I don't feel that just because a competitor has a feature, you should have the same feature, because maybe you've got a better way or a different way of doing things. But where I feel that a private chat adds value is, let's say, for example, and I'll use this example. So the Regarding 365 community is made up of a whole bunch of different contributors, and there's a core group of us who have private conversations. Now, we do have a team, but if we think about this in a business context, so let's say that Darrell and I are the bosses of Jethro, Dean, and Al. And yeah, Al, you're on first warning. The challenge is going to be if Darrell and I, so let's say Darrell's the 2IC, he and I want to have a conversation about Alistair's performance report. Where do we have this conversation? Yes, I can send it in an email. Yes, we can have it in a meeting room, but there needs to be some form of documentation of our conversation, or it needs to be asynchronous because maybe Darrell's in another country, or which he literally is, or maybe he's just on a project or something like that. So I can't rely on just being able to pick up the phone. Plus, also maybe I want to remember what was said and just be able to go back through the conversation. So the challenge by having a private chat is this is now in a different location. It means if I share, for example, the performance report that I wrote up with Alistair with his meeting, I'm now effectively putting that into my OneDrive to share it. So now I've got something that relates to the group in a private location that I'm now sharing with somebody else. So that's the thing is I think group chats work to a point, but I think the point of a teamwork is everything can be inside of that team, the private stuff and the public stuff. So I definitely see there's a case for it. What I hope is that it's not abused and that people spin up private channels left, right, and center because, as Jethro pointed out from an architecture perspective, setting this up is really quite messy and has been quite a challenge for the Microsoft team. I know they've actually had a number of different iterations because, as Al said, comes a group that sits behind Teams comes with a whole bunch of resources. So to have a private space in that collection of resources, they have to basically break stuff. So as I said, look, I think it's an important thing. I think it's an important feature to have. I do completely agree with Dean's point. A lot of people just want it because they're on the bandwagon. They're just saying, I want it because I want it. I think you need a valid business case for it. But I think the same can be said for teams in general, that before you spin up a team, you should have a business case for it. If Darrell and I, as managers of this particular team, I don't want to have another team for just the two of us to converse about this team. So that's the challenge, is there needs to be that kind of that halfway point. And as I said, I don't think a group chat cuts it because it's still kind of a personal, my OneDrive, my mailbox, those kind of things. So yeah, I think as it's about a balance. I do see that when it is released, there'll probably be challenges with it straight away. And I really hope that people don't jump on it and say, oh, this is crap. This is not what I wanted. It's like, well, sorry, trying to appease many masters with this one. I think, though, the reality as well, to a point that Al raised, is that, listen, second warning, is that if people want a really private conversation, as in, let's say that Jethro and I want to slag off about Al. Yes, Al, you're my scapegoat here today. We're not going to do that in Teams because hopefully we have a shred of a brain cell between us that, what is this, the Oscars playoff music? We have a shred of a brain cell between us that knows anything we say is going to be recorded and documented. People should know this about email now, so the same should be said about Teams. So the reality is if you want a truly private conversation, you are going to go behind closed doors. You're going to do it in some other way, like a WhatsApp group, like an SMS, Facebook Messenger, whatever. Again, the danger is, regardless what's said, if I say something racist about a South African, that if I say it in WhatsApp, it's documented. It can be used against me in a HR conversation, even though it's in a non-work technology. So that's the thing, is this is about choices, about making educated decisions, and it's about a balance.
Wowzers, we have a lot of discussion going there with different viewpoints, and I also want to bring in too, I guess it's not displaying too well here, but I've just added the chat. Have got some interesting points in there too. Actually, Stephen Collier points out that the way that Slack does it is there aren't teams and channels. It's just you're in Slack and they use channels, and that's it. So it's a private hashtag or channel or not. Noise, lots of noise.
Well, the thing is, Slack is very similar to IRC, Internet Relay Chat, for any of those who have been around since beyond the O's. And that's the thing, is in IRC you had basically public chat rooms, you had private chat rooms that were invite only effectively, and then you also had direct messages. So it's a pretty simple architecture, but the challenge with Teams is it sits on top of Groups, which has a mailbox, which has SharePoint, which has Planner, has all these resources. So you have to break that for the private aspect to work.
Do we need a private bubble?
Who gets to talk now?
This is free for all now, everyone. So jump on in, but try and keep your responses short and conversational.
So who would like to go next? I'm courteous enough to allow that, not like Loryan.
Just go. Move. Go. Shut up. You're wasting time right now. Go.
All right. So I agree completely with Loryan. Fit for purpose, right? The problem is that Teams is becoming the everything source, right? So we use Teams for everything. Right? And it's great, and Teams is replacing everything. And yes, if they had to give a channel a document library and break inheritance that way, it will fix the SharePoint part of it, right? For private channels. But I don't understand what the big hoo-ha is around it. Is it because, does everyone want it because Slack has? And everyone's going, but Teams is crap because Slack is better because they have one thing, right? And coming back to the private conversation, if I want to have a private conversation, I can go have it in SharePoint, right? Discussion forum and have a conversation.
Yeah.
That's how we did it, right?
But
you want to have a conversation. Where do you do it? And Yammer's there, right? It's not so much about the private conversation. You want a private conversation? Create a team for it. If you really want all the artifacts that goes with it, I don't understand.
But I think
finance should get a team. You can't have finance team and then have a channel that's private.
But often you don't want all the artifacts that go with it. You just want a place for a conversation and maybe some files. Because as I said, something like performance reviews relates to the team itself, but I don't need another mailbox for that. I don't need an email address. I don't need a planner for it. I don't even need a full SharePoint site. I need like a document library.
Don't use the mailbox. Don't use it. Nope.
Maybe we're focusing too much on the word private, right? Because the way that I look at it is maybe there's a need for a channel structure, and I don't want to bring it back to Teams, but I'm still going to, where you just have a reduced amount of people that are going to work together that is not the same amount of people that you have on your teams, right? So private, yes, we know there's a lot of ways that we can go around it, but I think what happens with organizations, right? They look at Microsoft and look at mostly also their marketing material and see like, okay, what do we need to use? And some of them, and again, I don't want to blame anybody, but look at the KPIs right now that the Microsoft salespeople are targeted for very highly. There's definitely an emphasis on teams, right? So they're going to push that. They're going to force that. They're going to try to get that. And I get it, right? We as so-called experts, we should be better than that, and we should deliver the right tool for the right job and all that, yada, yada, yada. But in the end, we're following that bandwagon equally as all the rest. So in the end, it's just like, is there a need in teams if we want to go that route that is not necessarily private, but just to reduce the amount of audience and get that to work?
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense, because what you're effectively wanting when you kind of have these private, and I wouldn't say they're necessarily private, I'd almost say they're just segmented places, is kind of like a Teams Lite experience. You don't want everything that comes with it. And you look at an example like, Darrell, in your organization, you have a team set up to basically for conversations between your manager and yourself. And I know a lot of other people do this. So which is fine in a small business where you've only got a certain amount of teams. As that grows, imagine for your manager who has potentially, I don't know, let's say in a larger organization, 35 direct reports. That's 35 teams they've got separate to the actual work-based teams that they're a part of. It's just not manageable or practical.
Why would you use teams? Why would you use teams in that example? That's just a bad example.
Well, it's not. Because
how do you know?
If you shut up, I will answer for you. This is turning into a CNN or Fox News panel.
No teams. How did they do it before Teams? What was life like before Teams? How did they manage those 35 employees?
Well, you probably would have had, email conversations. You would have had a phone call, and you would have had, shared files. Whereas now you can have one experience.
All private.
Yeah, but now what the point of Teams is that you can have it in the one experience, which is great because I don't have to go, click on File Explorer, click on the folder, click on the file. I can just go, here's my last conversation.
I attach a file to chat, right?
Yes.
Yeah. That's private, right?
But it's sitting in my OneDrive. It shouldn't be in my OneDrive.
If you were going to send a mail with an attachment, it would be in your mailbox and in that other person's mailbox.
That's what we're trying to get away from. Just because that's the way it was doesn't mean that was good. We're trying to get away from that.
If you're doing one-on-one conversations, like the fact that you can go back to a video, the fact that the notes are all in there, the fact that you can even have a performance improvement plan in that specific area. Normally what you would do is like what Loryan said, an email and then maybe a folder on your OneDrive for each single user, and you had to share it out, and accidentally you share it with somebody else and all that crap. Now, with Teams, ideally what you could have is really a channel, or try to have it that way at least.
That makes sense, because what you as a manager could have is one particular team set up.
Why do you care?
Have a single team set up and just have channels for every employee under you.
Why do you care where the thing is? Why don't you just have chats with every employee?
Listen, Mr.
Why do you care where that
object?
Nobody cares.
Well, let's think about that chat side of it.
Nobody cares where it's stored, Darrell.
Let's
not
think
where
about
it's
that.
stored, but what it's used though.
It's
not where
part
it's
of it.
stored. It's what part you're using. If you have even if you store it on the freaking moon, I don't think people care about that. Maybe except for data location. But that being said, is the fact where you have all these components now that can work together and make things easier and make things better. Where it's stored, who cares? But the fact is that the way that you're using it is attached to a certain platform. The way that you're using Yammer is not the same as you're using Teams. The ways that you're using Teams is not the ways as, what is it called? Kazaya thingy?
Kazala. Get it right.
Can I jump in there and say that I do care about where this content is stored. If I'm in chat and it's going into my OneDrive, we're all being told that's not the best place to be putting stuff. Exactly. If it's let's say HR files, so I can have a chat with the one-on-one, and I'm the manager and someone is my direct report, and everything we exchange is scattered across our two drives. Do I want it to be there? It really should be put somewhere in an official HR drive with all the permissions wrapped around it and various different policies.
Jethro wrote an article on content services, right? You wrote an article on content.
Right.
What is the premise of content services? We don't care where it is, we manage it.
I agree with Al on that one. But here's the thing. The thing is with content services, though, is that you bring everything together in a centralized environment. That is exactly what we're trying to do. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think the key thing here is about end user experience and usability. We're trying to get away from the challenge of users going to a whole bunch of different locations to access their stuff.
I would assume
or thinking too hard about it.
Well, and that's the thing. So maybe I want to have the danger with using the chat functionality is if I want to have a private chat with Darrell as my 2IC, that's a different conversation from Darrell as my colleague, as my mate who I'm saying, hey, you want to go to lunch? Because I don't want to see that thread in the middle of, hey, I've got another issue with Alistair. He said something mean to somebody else.
And it is all in one thread, isn't it, in chat?
Exactly. And that's the problem is chat is just this, you can't have conversation threads in chat. So whereas we can in Teams. So that's the benefit is, yes, chat kind of works-ish, but you're basically putting a round peg in a square hole.
Now that's probably the first cogent argument I've heard for private teams or private channels in Teams, because it is the difference between threaded conversations and just blah chat, right? But I still go back as Jethro said, as so-called experts, we owe it to everybody to start out with, what are you trying to do? What is your business objective? And if you start out by saying, it's a very different thing to say, I'd like to have a technology-enabled private conversation, and I am a Microsoft customer, versus saying, I got to have private channels in Teams. That's a totally different thing. We should always approach this as, what capability do you need to enable for that business user to get their job done?
Dean, I'm going to say something that's potentially going to piss a lot of people off. End users don't know what they want. They just want to do their job.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. But
so they don't want to have a place for a conversation with threaded chats and single place for files and that. I just want to manage my team and fire Al. That's all I want to do.
Yeah. Yeah, but we need to get them away from having to think so hard about what to use when, right? I just think that it needs to be really obvious. And I really like what you said about, I going into this, I was a big proponent. Okay, if you've got to have private and it's got to be Teams, then go one chat or have a group chat. But you made an argument that said, that kind of gave me the thought, well, maybe I need a little more than that. But I'm still not completely convinced, but that's the first thing that I've heard today that would make me want to potentially think about voting on user voice. But I still think there's a lot of other really good places to have private conversations.
I've got the solution. I have the solution. You can thank me. You can thank me later. All right. OneNote Classroom Notebook. Anyone use it?
Yeah.
You have the teacher-student thing. You can even have parents come. It's isolated, cut off. Right? So students can talk to the teacher directly. Right?
They can share their work directly, yes.
Yeah, so classroom assignments, it's based on users, it's got authentication, all of those things, right? You can have a one-on-one with the teacher. No one else can see that. That's baked into the OneNote Classroom Notebook, which comes with the educational SKU for Teams. So just make it like they did with Starfire, which is Schyff. Now make it available to everyone. You want to manage.
We're not talking about private notes. We're talking about private conversations.
Well, oh my God! Don't backtrack, Loryan.
I want to bring it back.
Give it a different name. Give it the title. Call it a different name, and then do it that way. So don't call it a classroom notebook. Call it whatever you want to call it.
And you're out.
I want to bring it back to actually what Dean was saying, right? Is that when we look at it completely away from what is being said in marketing and sales and so-called experts, and really look at as an information technology exercise, we can honestly say, and I think everybody would agree, except maybe Al, that we have everything we need to be able to do this. Maybe not necessarily in the same tool, but here's the thing, right? You have to look at human nature. When end users don't, like Loryan said, don't know what they want, they don't know how to do certain things, they look at their trusted advisors. What do the trusted advisors do? go to Teams. Go to Microsoft. Sorry, Microsoft is like Teams. It's all based on FOMO, the fear of missing out. When I look at announcements of Microsoft and they're like, hey, look at this new feature in Teams, new feature in this, new feature in X, Y, and Z. I'm like, I need to check this out. Maybe I'm missing something. Blah 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 blah. We're stepping away. And I think everybody kind of needs to protect themselves from that pitfall. Is like, am I still doing the right thing for my customer? Is that what they want? Is that what they need? Maybe even protect the customer from themselves. But here's the thing, right, is that we're going back to human nature, and humans have an incredible case of fear of missing out. And that's exactly what is happening here is like, I want this. I have Teams. I don't want to go somewhere else. I see others have this specific feature, so I want this. When you see in user voice, I need it because I want it, that's fear of missing out.
I know that we could definitely continue this conversation, and we will, surely in social media and the like. But we can wrap it up there.
Private.
Not in private. I know. Well, it could be a DM.
Telegraph. We need to use Telegraph. Telegram. Is it Telegram?
Morse code.
The other watcher.
Oh, I'm going to create a new one called Napkin, and it's just going to be right on the napkin. Take a picture and hold it up. Wait, hold it up and take a picture. Forget that. In Teams, wherever we're
No, the ultimate private note is class notes. Just write on a piece of paper, similar to your idea, Darrell, but just, fold it, scrunch it up, and pass it to the person.
I can hear almost a bit chain. I was going to say Bitcoin, blockchain. Yeah,
blockchain is no longer immutable. It's been hacked.
It isn't. You see, it's getting passed through everyone, and it's all about the ledger. That's about all I know. That's maybe all we have time for. But of course, you will find regarding 365 doing our thing and talking. You'll see the Australian and the South African throwing fists at each other as they try and figure out in time. Paper, scissors, rock. Jethro's also writing and blogging and doing his videos in different places, and Dean too. So tune in. You will find more of our conversations and engage with us too.
I have a question before you go. So if a channel is private, right, and you've got if a channel is private,
let it go.
If a channel is private, and you have a protection policy on the private channel because it shouldn't be deleted, but you delete the group, what happens to the private channel? My closing thoughts. Thank you very much. Just
same thing. Same thing that happens to messages now in a team or a mailbox when they have a retention policy on them and you delete them. It is visibly deleted, but the content remains.
There you go.
And you're fired.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you again. Bye for now.